the Sustainability Management Master's Program, you're answering one simple question. Do you care about your future generation? If you care about your kids, their grandkids, then you care about sustainability. And a sustainability manager is someone who has the tools to make people understand how they can contribute towards developing a sustainable world. We have both part-time and full-time students. Our curriculum is 30 hours. Instead of thesis, we have a research project course and a seminar course which provides them with the kind of research background they will need to be successful in their job. But at the same time, sustainability is not always everything about environment. It also relates to the business. They will take a sustainable business strategies course. They will take a project management course. Most of these courses are going to be taught by industry people, the people who are doing sustainability on a daily basis as a part of their job. Any organization that has a large number of employees and has a physical infrastructure, they will have to have a sustainability office. If you have the passion to develop and maintain a sustainable world, come to us and we will help you shape your passion into a career which will create an impact.
The Stevens Institute of Technology is proud to present the Hugo New Corporation Sustainability Seminar Series, brought to you by Brown and Codwell, Geocetic Consultants, H2M Architect and Engineers, BEM Systems, and Catalyst Group.
So thank you, Dr. Sarkar, for introducing me. I want to say, first of all, thank you, not just for inviting me, but also thank you for making this full circle in two ways. One, as I was a student at Stevens and am now kind of an instructor by doing one of the seminars, and also being one of the real last seminars. I didn't actually know that fact until you just told me. And that is kind of an honor. So I want to make this seminar really thought-provoking and insightful. In some ways, it might be a little inspiring. At least I hope, because it will really directly speak to students who are going to be doing projects like these next semester. If you are a sustainability management student, or if you are here as an undergraduate student, you also feel the same way because you're doing things that relate to sustainability. And so I'd really want to start by talking about just one really major fact. We're living in unprecedented times. And a lot of people would say, that's really trite of you to say that. But when I think of unprecedented times, I really break it down into a few categories, and you'll really see how what we're dealing with right now is unprecedented and why students need to be prepared to handle these challenging times because of the circumstances that we're in. So first of all, if you think about category number one, culturally, politically, you think about the Berlin Conference in 1884 that partitioned a whole continent without having a single representative present from that continent. Then there is scientific and technological unprecedented experiences where you think about the molecular structure of DNA being identified in 1953. And then the Green Revolution in the 1950s and even the 1960s, that's purported to have saved 1 billion lives. And the last one that I can even think about is just economically, with China's rapid GDP growth and its annual growth rate staying pretty much at 10%, even though it was technically under a command economy. And we see kind of all of these things happening right now. So first of all, with the US facing global criticism for ditching the Paris Climate Accord. If everyone after November 3rd, on November 4th, Donald Trump officially withdrew from the Paris Climate Accord. But then at the same time, we are at a page in history where a region in Brazil, the Pantanal region, which is a wetlands, a sequester of carbon, is burning right in front of our eyes. It's burning, and they haven't seen anything like this in decades. They haven't seen anything since at least the 1970s. And there have been a lot of interviews with people in Brazil, farmers, firefighters, who say that they've not seen anything like this since the 1970s. But at the same time, we see opportunities for real growth and innovation. So Algorithmia, with an article, they said that machine learning is to boom in 2020. This was before, actually. This was before we got into the COVID pandemic. But they were saying that machine learning, which is the whole concept that if you feed a machine more data, because it has an algorithm, it's going to improve how it works. We're going to see that the machine is going to get better at what it does. And we see that in instances like this tongue-like robot gripper. And if you are in certain industries, if you have been, from my industry, as Dr. Sarkar mentioned, is a lot of waste management. And something like this can completely change how MRFs, how material recovery facilities do their work, or manufacturing facilities do their work. And so what I really am trying to get to is that to motivate the way that students are going about thinking about sustainability is that we have to redefine or even rethink what sustainable development means at the same time, because there are so many different circumstances at play. And that's typically where the great idiom, think globally, act locally, comes up, where we have to be cognizant of what's happening around us, happening, in Brazil, happening in California with the wildfires there, happening in China with its with the pandemic having technically come from there, so on and so forth. But at the end of the day, we're still acting locally. And by that, I mean that we are acting on the ground. I'm working with a couple of Stevens students when it comes to carbon sequestration for the dairy for the dairy farm industry. Is we're thinking about these global issues, but we're still acting on a local scale. Now, going back to my immediate presentation topic, which is the sustainability components assessment. How exactly do we think globally and act locally? What exactly does that mean? Do we have ways to think about it? Is there some sort of guidance that we have? So on and so forth. The best question really is, how do we assess criteria? And I'll get a little bit into a talk that we had last week that dealt with some of the things that we'll talk about later on. But really, it comes down to, in my opinion, that the most effective way to assess criteria or even just get things done on the ground is through projects. And that is when a team comes together with clearly defined objectives. It's limited in duration. They have a definite beginning and end. There is a series of interdependent tasks. One after the other, they have this to complete. And then right after that, they have this to complete, a whole set of assignments. This is all from what's called the PMBOK, the Project Management Book of Knowledge. And there's a certain level of uncertainty when it comes to completing a project. And going back to what I said about the PMBOK is that it gives us all of these things to handle these challenges. We have the triple constraint, the project charter, so on and so forth, to really give us a sense of how to handle the challenges that we are seeing, for example, with the fires in Brazil, or with the Paris Climate Accord. Was the Paris Climate Accord, was that considered a project or not? That's a question to ask. And the PMBOK gives guidance on executing a project from beginning to closure. And we integrate sustainability into these things as well. Some of the things that sustainability management students know about is materiality assessment, the 3P paradigm, life cycle assessment, materiality assessment being, the situation when we are seeing what is relevant to the company and what's relevant to external stakeholders. The 3P paradigm being the model that we have toward thinking about what the bottom line is. It's no longer just about profit, but it's also people, planet, and profit, and life cycle assessment. And there are a whole bunch of other things as well when it comes to integrating sustainability as well that I'm not going to go into, but just to keep in mind. But there's still an issue all in play with what I have said. We're asking students to handle these really challenging circumstances and come up with solutions with this effective way that we call projects. And we have the PMBOK, we have these sustainability techniques, but there's something missing. And I mentioned Harry Etcher before, who spoke about ESG. He spoke about ESG criteria. So ESG stands for environmental, social, and governance criteria. But the issue really comes up, it's only for businesses. Everything that I really just spoke about has been guided and aimed and focused on businesses. And we need something for students. If we really want to prepare students to handle the sustainability challenges that we're going to face in the next 5, 10, 20, 30 years, when I have children, so on and so forth, we have to have something that's specifically for students. And that's where the sustainability components assessment came in, that I worked on as my capstone with Dr. Brunel as my advisor. And the capstone assessment was the result of a lot of field research, whether it be interviews with specific professors or with specific students who are completing their senior design projects, also with other universities, so on and so forth, where I eventually developed the thing that you see behind you. And so the SEA makes it a little easier to actually evaluate how students are doing when it comes to success on a project, the same way that we would do for a business with ESG criteria. So the SEA has key learning outcomes that are measured using 4 components. And the same way, the reason I put KPIs in parentheses is because I want you to think about KPIs in the same way that you would think about key learning outcomes, in the same way that you would think about KPIs. Key learning outcomes being, how are we measuring whether students are achieving or not achieving success? The first one is research and sustainability analysis. So we want to ask our students, are you looking deep into sustainability? What is sustainability? what benchmarking is, what are the sustainability methods that I was just talking about a little while ago. Are you looking at the trade-offs? Are you looking at things that really make sustainability sustainability? So are you doing effective analysis? The next thing is project development. You'd have all of this research and sustainability analysis, but are you actually putting together a schedule and incorporating the sustainability analysis into your schedule? Do you have deadlines? Do you have milestones? Are your milestones being reached? To what extent are they being reached? In addition to that, though, you want to ask yourself, well, are you also just achieving whatever project you set out to do? The next one, which is really interesting and not really something that sustainability leaders would immediately hear or be measured on, is teamwork and leadership. And that really goes deep into, are you handling conflict well? So if an issue comes up where you cannot figure out how to resolve resolve the fact that you haven't attained or met a given milestone, are you handling that conflict well by discussing what are we going to do next? How are we going to modify the schedule? So on and so forth. But it also asks you to self-reflect as a leader. Are you thinking about what my strengths are, my assets? Are you thinking about what your liabilities, your weaknesses are as a leader, and what you bring to the team and what you can work on? The final one is the deliverable, just asking students to think about how they are presenting in their written reports and their oral reports. So the same thing that you would ask yourself in, I guess you'd say an introductory English an English literature course or introductory English composition course. It's the same thing that you would say for the deliverable KPIs. And the goal is to measure how effectively students incorporate sustainability into their projects, the same way that ESG criteria are asking for businesses to measure how effectively they're incorporating sustainability into their projects or their programs, so on and so forth. So the SCA, because there is just a lot to cover, as you can just see, was broken down into many subcomponents. So sustainability analysis was broken down into United Nations Sustainable Development Goals. So you might know that the United Nations has 17 Sustainable Development Goals. One of them is on climate change. Another one is on gender equality. Another one is on zero poverty. And we're asking students to show that they have knowledge and comprehension of the UN Sustainable Development Goals, which reflects of their knowledge of sustainability. The next is benchmarking. And when we talk about benchmarking, we're asking students that they are able to look at what other projects have been done and then come up with better ways to do their own project. So when you're doing your own project, it's very easy to replicate what someone else has done, but you need to ask yourself, if someone else has done it, can we do it better? The methodology part, like I said, goes into the sustainability methods, life cycle assessment, is materiality assessment relevant, so on and so forth. A whole bunch of methodologies that you can look into. Sustainability understanding goes deeper into sustainability analysis by asking students, think about the trade-offs of the sustainability components that sustainability management students you're learning about right now. We have social components, we have environmental components, and we have economic components. If we're working on a project, which one is the most important, that if we're working with a client, which one should we focus on? Should we focus on the economic component the most, should we put most priority on the economic components, or should we put it on social components, or should we put it on the environmental components? And it's different based on the project that you're dealing with. If you're on a farm and you are dealing with, and you're not really dealing with many concerns with capital costs or operating costs, then economic factors aren't going to be as big of a concern when it comes to sustainability understanding. But if you're working in a project like the dairy farm project that I'm working on, economic factors are going to be a lot more important. And that really is something that's to be considered when you talk about sustainability analysis. Project development, like I said, you break it down into schedule and milestones. So schedule, you want to ask yourself, okay, the PMBOK Project Management Book of Knowledge, which a lot of sustainability management students either have taken or are taking, it gives us a way of thinking about making a schedule. You know, we have CERT, we have the CPM, critical path method, but is our schedule actually really helping us? And are we incorporating sustainability into our schedule? Which leads into the next thing, the second component, milestones. Are our milestones really reflecting the sustainability analysis that that we've been doing? So do we have milestones that specifically ask for sustainability analysis? So we did a life cycle assessment. Have we put milestones on each part of the life cycle assessment over time? Teamwork and leadership, like I said, goes a bit deeper into the team as a whole. So collaboration and team effectiveness asks you to think about things that I mentioned earlier: conflict management, teamwork. So teamwork being like division of labor, role assignment, being able to handle meetings and be active listeners. All those things go into collaboration and team effectiveness. Leadership effectiveness and self-reflection, asks you, like I said, to think about yourself as a leader, as someone who is not just reflecting on what it means to be part of a group, but is also reflecting on what it means for me to be part of a group. So, like I said, your strengths and your weaknesses would go in here. Leadership and decision making, which I haven't spoken about just yet, is probably the most contentious one. It was the most difficult one for me and Professor Brunel to discuss and conclude and make a conclusion on. It asks students to think about how exactly did leadership influence the decision-making process? Because at the end of the day, there is a little bit of politics when it comes to making decisions that a lot of people either don't really know about or don't immediately acknowledge. And this is where you really assess yourself, or instructors and mentors assess students on how effectively they came to conclusions or decisions, or how they handled recommendations from the feedback that they got. And the last one, deliverable, thoroughness, comprehensiveness. How thoroughly did you cover sustainability in your written report, your oral report, organization and structure? Did you place sustainability analysis in the right places? Was it awkwardly placed in other places? So on and so forth. Visual appeal. It's really important to make sure that when you are talking to your audience, that you have, look at this slide right now, rather than have it as a list of bullet points, did you give animation, or did you use something that would grab the audience's attention? Clarity, like I said, think about English composition. Are you using grammar correctly? Are you writing succinctly? Are you writing precisely? Are you writing in such a way that your ideas are very clearly assessed, are very clearly expressed in a technical and scientific way? And finally, going along really with visual appeal is meaningfulness and significance. Are you writing in a way that is, or presenting in a way that is important to the audience? Because when you talk to the audience or you say anything to the audience and they're thinking this doesn't really have anything to do with what the project relates to, then the SEA is going to tell you that you did a poor job on that and you need to reflect on that. And it's really important that I just want to note this, that a lot of these subcomponents are very interrelated. And so benchmarking and methodologies, for instance, are really interrelated because benchmarking is technically a methodology. And like I said, with meaningfulness and significance is very related to visual appeals, because you cannot make your presentation or your report that meaningful if you don't include visual appeals to grab the audience's attention. So I just want to give a quick simulation of the sustainability components assessment. And I'm going to just give two. So, because as you can see, there are quite a few. UN SDGs. It's very hard to actually ask as an instructor or as a mentor or even as a student if the students are achieving the UN SDGs. So we start off with a statement on the UN SDGs. So our students conducting a discussion for how the project would accomplish targets set forth by two UN SDGs. And Professor Brunel and I have broken that down into direct and indirect UN SDGs. And then you have a set of essential questions to ask. And then from there, it's really easy to just say from 0 to 4, are students yes or no completing this? So 1, do students cover the human aspects intrinsic to their senior design project? And this was specifically for senior design and senior design engineering capstone projects. So we need them to think about the human and environmental aspects that are intrinsic to the project. In addition, we also want to ask ourselves, are students explaining how the project would accomplish the targets of the selected Sustainable Development Goals? And you go from 0 to 4. So, are students conducting any discussion? No, no discussion is conducted whatsoever. In the report, in the written report or the oral report, there's no discussion whatsoever. There is discussion, but it only covers 1 UN SDG, and it's not connected to the project. You go to 2, 3, 4, and then at 4, you really have full discussion of the UN SDGs, and it's related to the project. So that's just an example of the UN SDGs. Another one that I talked about was leadership effectiveness. So we're asking students to self-reflect on as them being members of a team, and them understanding what their weaknesses and their assets are. So we start off, like I said, with that same statement. So each team member displays a high degree of reflection on their leadership skills as displayed by several key metrics. Same essential questions are here, and it goes from 0 to 4. Students engage in no self-reflection activities. So, the professor, the instructor, the mentor would have to provide self-reflection activities for the student to be actually be able to do some self-reflection. Um, and then all the way down to students show self-reflection and consider, their development as the project goes on. Now, when it comes to the scoring, you add up at each, and um, one of the biggest challenges we saw when we were simulating was with the scores. But the way that you would do the scoring for using, at the time it was called the Sustainability Implication Scorecard. Now it's called the SCA. Is you would add up at each point. So if it's a 4, 4, 4, 4, goes right here, all tallied up, goes right here, and you divide, and you get the grade and provide that to the students. And so what takes us, me and Professor Brunel, to the next step, as some of you might be thinking, is that there's a lot to improve on. This was just a capstone. The most important thing is to improve the rubric. So as you saw with the rubric, we didn't get the opportunity, at least to the extent that we wanted to assert its validity and reliability. So by that, I mean, if we were to have an instructor use the SCA on a same group of students over the course of 3, 6, or 9 months, would we get the same results? We don't know that just yet. And when it comes to validity, is this something that would lead to the results that we want to see in person? So theoretically, this looks great, but in practice, is this actually going to work? And that leads us into making necessary revisions. The second thing is transforming the SCA into more of a learning experience to reinforce learning. Some of you might be thinking that, this is a rubric. So, with ESG criteria, Harry Etra, he spoke about, we can measure our success over time. How exactly do you measure success of a student's learning over time? So that's a question with the SCA. Can we do that when it comes to their learning? And the only way to do that is really by understanding what students, instructors, and mentors' attitudes are specifically toward engineering capstone projects. And we're going to develop instruments for measuring students' progress throughout the semester. So one of them is the Sustainability Components Assessment, but another one would be a survey to ask students, well, what do you think when it comes to the UN SDGs? What do you think about yourself? Are you achieving the UN SDGs? Rather than a professor or a mentor doing it for them and saying, yes, you are doing this, no, you're not doing this, they're going to say to themselves, yes, I think I am doing this, and we're going to compare it to what the professors are actually saying. And eventually, we hope to develop a collaborative effort between instructors and students so that rather than the SCA just being, well, not just the SCA being this learning experience that's run through the instructors, but rather it is a collaborative experience, because when students start school, when they are freshmen, they are really entering the engineering workforce, for instance. But when they're seniors, for instance, with senior design, we want them to come out of it, as I said, prepared and ready to work alongside the clients to come up with solutions, so that rather than them looking at, this as being a grade, they're working with the professors as more of this being a project to complete and we want to succeed as much as possible. And the last one that we're looking into is understanding students' career interests by tailoring engineering capstone projects specifically to what they are interested in doing. And this research study is actually being done through the American Society of Engineering Education. And Professor Brunel and I will be presenting not just on a revised rubric, but also on the research that we do, hopefully when June comes around in person. And that's it for me.